So you guys had some questions for me?
Yeah,
Yes, we do.
definitely. So maybe we'll start off by just giving you a little bit of insight on the project that we're doing.
Okay.
And so we are doing a partnership with Ljubljana Pride, which is the organization Katja's from. And here in Berlin, we're part of Loesje. And
Okay.
we're working on a project on combating hate speech in public spaces, uh,
Nice.
and focusing or using kind of street art as the tool to take space. Uh, so yeah, basically we've seen a lot of kind of rise in discrimination of all types, but we
Uh-huh.
also have seen it in public spaces. And so we've seen graffiti that is discriminatory or that promotes hate speech. And so what we're doing is we're kind of working to combat that and use street art, which is
Nice.
something right down your alley. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, basically, you know, we want to know a little bit about yourself, uh, why you chose art, and also include a little bit of your background, your identity, your migrant background, for us.
Okay. So I'm from Salinas, California, which is, if I were to describe it to somebody, is a migrant town. The reason the town exists is because of the fertile soil. And the town is basically built to house what back in the day, well, still is fields. But, as time goes by, a city becomes a city um, onto itself. But the reason the town exists is because of agriculture. Um, it's a very fertile um, it's a very fertile valley with the underground river running through it. So we grow in Salinas, we grow all of the leafy greens for, I mean, all over the world. But I've been to every state I've been to. Every time I go to a grocery store, I check the produce to see where it came from. And strawberries come from Watsonville. Our valley is just packed. All the artichokes come from Castroville. And my grandparents came from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl, during that mass migration. And on my other side, my dad's side, my great grandparents came from Mexico um, to also work the fields. So the reason I exist is because of field work and migration. The reason I'm from Salinas. And I grew up on the north side of Salinas, which is like at the very corner of Salinas, surrounded by fields. My middle school was three parts surrounded by fields, a street in front, and the houses on the other side of the street. Um, so I didn't migrate here, but my family all migrated to Salinas. I've migrated to San Francisco and then to Oakland, more due to an art situation migration rather than a fieldwork situation. Um, Growing up on the north side of Salinas, I just had a baby 9 weeks ago. And so I was showing my girlfriend, the mother of my child, my elementary school pictures. And if you look at my elementary school pictures, there's about four white people in a class, an Asian person, a black person, and then the rest of the class is all Hispanic. So I identified more with Hispanics than I did with white people. White people lived on the south side of Salinas, where the people who owned the fields lived and the people who owned all the businesses in town. And that definitely wasn't our situation. Um, I ended up starting to do artwork in daycare. Like as soon as I grabbed a pencil and a pad and crayons, I kind of set apart from the rest of my class. There was one kid in daycare. His name was Miguel. and he was an amazing artist at a very young age. I actually wonder what's going on with him. And he would teach me how to draw comic books. He was like a grade above me. And so we took comic books and then we drew the comic book characters in the comic books. So the beginning of my artwork was a lot of reproducing other artwork to, to learn how to get the right sizing and things like that. And then very quickly, I mean, within the first grade, because I could draw those things, people, the girls mostly was my demographic, wanted their names drawn so they could slide it in their binders, in that little clear form of their binders. And I was able to draw like block letters, like first try. It wasn't a difficult situation for me. So I would say my graffiti writing started in the first grade, constantly drawing letters and people's names and making it better, and then adding colors. And then I took every art class in school, in elementary school, that you don't get like much of a choice. But then in middle school, took all the art classes. In high school, you have a little bit more of a choice on how many electives you could take. So I took all the art classes, every single one that they had provided. At that point in time, though, not really ever producing artwork on my own. I would just do it for class. And I was mostly like into skateboarding. And then that's just another like creative expression of oneself, skateboarding. It's very like organic and using your surroundings to be creative with your body and your skateboard. And I started a skateboard crew, and all Hispanic, 100% Hispanic skateboard crew. And then we eventually, because we had a crew, started getting spray cans and writing our crew name all around the town. And that was like another rush that, because skateboarding was a great rush, but that was just another rush that can happen at nighttime when skateboarding didn't really happen. So I'd skateboard all day, and then we would draw pictures in the evening, and then in the wee hours of nighttime, we'd go spray paint on stuff. And that kind of turned a page for me where I was drawing every day constantly in a black book and drawing all kinds of bizarre things, because with letters you have kind of a guideline. You have to make the letter, but you could go as wild as you want. And so I was drawing all kinds of bizarre things, and my mind expanded into a bunch of different realms. And we eventually met a graffiti artist that was about 10 years older than us, who had been doing it. And so he kind of took us under his wing, taught us the ropes, what to do, what not to do. And we kind of just grew really fast because we had such a heavy weight that we had to live up to. It's like if you're training to box, you want to box the champ, you got to fight people who are better than you. So he was so good, he pushed us to excel. And we then very quickly built a legal wall. And that's how the spray can turned into a paintbrush and not just like a tool for vandalism. We really got the time, the daylight to sit there and try to like paint portraits and like move into the next stage of graffiti, to where we could do our letters, do full backgrounds, and kind of just like really take it serious. And then me and Margarita actually grew up a block away from each other in the same neighborhood. But we didn't really meet and start to like vibe and hang out and work together until I was like post high school. She was working down at the soup kitchen, doing all kinds of political stuff. And we eventually opened up a space for the kids down there. So one of the owners of the building gave us a building rent free. So we had this huge building, and the side of the building it had an empty lot next to it. So he let us do production murals on the side. And we kind of like ended all of the graffiti violence in our town just with that wall. We would invite each graffiti crew to do it, and their graffiti would run for a month. But we would invite all the other guys to come around too, so that we can all get to know each other. And there was no reason we should have been like having violence towards each other when we didn't even know each other and we were all into the same thing. It just didn't make sense to me. So we used that space to like defuse all of the graffiti beef. But then 2 days a week, we would teach classes for all the kids, because where the building was like our Skid Row. It's where all the homeless people and all the drug addicts lived. And then the soup kitchen was right there. So that's how we fed the homeless. But then all the children of the homeless, they would come to our classes and we would just paint. We would draw on black books. We would talk about art, talk about politics, and then just kind of give these kids hopefully a path. Because education is a path, but art is also a path, and entrepreneurship is a path, and there's so many paths. And so we had kind of created that space for them. We would do art shows and have DJs come, and it was a really good experience of mine. But at that time, I was kind of dabbling in narcotics, and that took a really bad turn in my life. It went really bad, and I didn't paint for probably 8 years after that program. I ended up going to San Francisco to go to this place called Delancey Street. It's like the best rehab facility in all of the states. It was a 2-year program. It didn't cost me a dime. I just had to work, and I ended up staying there for 4 years, and then I left. And then in there, we live with about 300 people from all walks of life, and it's all ran by residents. There's no outside help. Nobody's paid. It's just us taking care of each other. And the entire program is modeled after immigration. When you first get into Delancey Street, the first stage you're on is immigration. The president's family immigrated from, where did they immigrate from? Poland. And they were Jewish, and they moved to Delancey Street, and the Jewish community took them in. They set them all up. They got their life together, went out and bought a home. And she emulated that process at Delancey Street, where you migrate into Delancey Street. We set you up, get you sober, get you working, get you a job, teach you how to function in society, stay as long as you need to, and then do a workout process where you get to save money. So I ended up staying there for 4 years because I liked what was happening there. And the only people who run it were us. So it was vital, I felt, to stay and give back what some people gave me years of their life. And so I stayed there to give back years of my life, to help other people. And then leaving there, I was in San Francisco. And like I said, I'm from an agriculture town where life is pretty simple. The goal for life is get a job, come home, drink some beer, make dinner, and then take the weekends off and maybe go to the lake. But leaving that rehab in San Francisco, it was a whole new giant world. And so it took me a good year and a half to kind of get my bearings and to get my feet underneath me. My first apartment in San Francisco, I rented a room. It cost me $1,850 a month. It was a lot. So I was working 11 shifts a week, 12-hour days. But then once I kind of got my bearings, it had been now almost 8 years since I've touched a spray can. And then I realized it was time. I was like, it's just time. And then someone commissioned me for a piece, and then it just started, like the addiction of painting just took over. And so I was painting here and there, meeting a couple people. I met a few Chileans who ended up kind of like taking me into their community out here. And that's how I kind of got all my walls going. And that's mostly who I paint with, is Christian and Pancho. And Irene, she's from the States. And then I got my girlfriend pregnant. And so I was moving to Oakland. I moved to Oakland from Albany. It's also in the East Bay. The same day we went into full lockdown, the full quarantine. March 16th was the same day I moved in. I was moving my stuff and I was watching the news, and it was like, we're done, we're shutting down. And I was like, wow. And so we had realized we were pregnant. And so we moved in together. And it was just kind of doing quarantine, eating, drinking, and nothing really going on. And then George Floyd was murdered. And after George Floyd's murder, I had posted a picture of George Floyd. I wanted to paint a mural, and I anticipated painting um, a large mural that was going to run for a really long time as a constant reminder to people of the realities here in America. And, when everything's going well, people just forget and they just don't pay attention. And the world had all the time to pay attention to what was actually happening. And this wasn't anything new. This has been going on for 400 years in our country. And so I put that out, said, anyone got a wall, the painting's free. It's not for cost, it's for the cause. And a friend reached out to me, gave me a connection, this girl, Carmen, and she said, come down tomorrow, 11 a.m., and there'll be walls. And I didn't know what to expect. So I drove downtown Oakland, 14th and Broadway, which is one of the main intersections of traffic in downtown Oakland. And there were hundreds of artists from everywhere you could see. If you stood in an intersection, you would look down all four streets, and on both sides of the streets, as far as you could see, there was an artist painting all the plywood that had went up over the busted out windows. Because the weekend before was when we protested, and when we protested, when the nighttime came, the anger really came out, and it got expressed physically. I wouldn't say violently because no one was hurt. There was one person hurt, but that wasn't from a protester protesting injustice. Come to find out, the guy who killed a police officer, it was a hate crime. And so they boarded up, the whole city boarded up their windows, and we went down and painted them. And there was a protest that night scheduled at 8 p.m. to protest the curfew that they had put on us to try to stop us. And so it was at 14th and Broadway was the meeting point. So thousands of people were meeting there by 8, and I got there at noon, and I just brought paint that I had, and I just started painting. And I didn't grid the wall out, I just freehanded it and just was moving as fast as I could. And then I ran to the store to get more paint from the colors I ran out of and came back, and I was just painting. I was painting as fast as I possibly could paint with a fat cap. I had 3 news crews set up and film behind me, and I had no clue they were even there. My girlfriend had told me, do you realize the news was here 3 times? And I didn't even know because I didn't turn around. And then I was still spraying, and the protest started, and the cops are coming. So I packed my stuff up and got my car out of there because I knew if my car stayed there, then it wasn't going to be a pretty situation. So got my car there. The next morning came down and then continued to paint. I got in contact with the guy who was running, kind of like organizing it, because I didn't know how legal it was. I wasn't really too concerned because the cops are kind of just set back on their toes. In Oakland, we kind of have a pretty good, like, the cops kind of understand if they push too far that we will burn the city down. And so they kind of stay back and just let us do our thing. Because the city is very like unified. And if people are like start to, be oppressive, we gather really quickly and push back. And they know that. And so they kind of, they're, the politicians who, whose jobs are up to us to give them to, kind of tell them, just sit back and relax and everything will go better that way. Which is something I'm really proud of, Oakland kind of having that, people having power in that way. And so we, for a week long, just painted the streets, and we were just out there in broad daylight. People were donating materials, and it was one of the most beautiful things as an artist I have ever seen. And it gave me more purpose as an artist and more like understanding how powerful my journey can be, because I always just wanted to paint pretty things, to provide beauty to the world where there necessarily wasn't beauty before. And now having a voice to like my images affecting people and having a message and a power to impact society has really been like an overwhelmingly uh, amazing feeling as an artist to just be part of something so important. And so we just went into the streets and we painted. And I know that San Francisco kind of got on board the same way Oakland got on board, but Oakland did it first. Oakland really was like in the morning hour, just out there painting. And San Francisco was like, we need to do that too. And even Sacramento, which is not too far, had a really big push to like the artists to be part of the protest in their fashion. Because the more hands in makes lighter work. So everyone needs to be involved was our perspective. Does that about sum up the question?
Definitely. Thanks for sharing. So yeah, why did you choose graffiti and mural art? Like, what's the power behind it that made you want to use that to express yourself and represent your community?
So graffiti, I would say graffiti more. I didn't really choose graffiti. I would say graffiti kind of chose me in a way because we skateboarded, but we come from gang culture, and all of us skateboarders, we didn't want to be in gangs, but because we were from such a heavy gang culture, like our skateboard crew was kind of our gang. And so we did the graffiti to kind of represent our skate crew. We wanted to be famous. We wanted to be the best, and we were the best in town, and we wanted everyone to know our name. And no matter where you lived in town and out of town, we wanted people to know who we were and that we were kind of a force to be reckoned with. And so I want to say graffiti kind of came out of necessarily a bad place, but from now as an adult, from like a culture that we were a product of our environment. And then street art and murals grew from that love of art and like maturing. So I did graffiti not for the love of graffiti, but for like representing my crew. And then it turned into a love of graffiti. And then for the love of graffiti turned into like me being an adult and trying to monetize my talent. And then in that process, I had gained much more skill. And then using the street art as protest was just another part of my maturing as I grow as an adult, as a person. Then using my platform to have more purpose as one does as they grow. And a lot of it, I'm not going to take credit for all of it because the community I lived in at the time had a big impact on the possibility and the like the momentum. The community was so welcoming and so like, this is what we're doing. If you want in, you're in, you know? And like, it's just so like contagious and infectious. And like Oakland is, I feel more at home in Oakland than I do when I go back and visit Salinas. I mean, I miss things about Salinas, but like as an artist, there's not as large of a community in Salinas, whereas in Oakland, there's hundreds, thousands of artists just there, and they're constantly involved, and it's just like the most beautiful thing. And where like just happened to be where I'm at in life, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and I think also society there at the same time. Where art is, where street art is, globally right now. It's street art's bigger right now than it's ever been. When I was coming up as a graffiti artist, there wasn't this many avenues for street art that there is today. I believe the world is in like a new renaissance And we're kind of turning a page into a more enlightened, a more mentally awoke stage, you know, that the generations are seeing the world differently, seeing people differently, actually seeing people, and moving past more of like a barbaric survival of the fittest, the tough guys, the champ, old archaic mentality that I feel, well, at least in America, that's my reference point, um, that we used to live in, and that we're kind of changing that. That art is important, that food and culture is important. Not that it always hasn't been, but it's just I just feel like the world is at a melting point and it's changing for the good. And I don't take credit for all those changes, though I know that the world has evolved me as well. Just seeing and learning as I get older, because as a young kid, I didn't have a big education, and you know, I didn't get past high school. I didn't go to college. I went to jail, and just being in a metropolitan area where they're so progressive, I've learned a lot and been able to participate in what was already happening here. Um, so I want to like give the city credit and the community credit for that evolution in my art phase.
All right.